my presentation is the Army versus the Bionicles. This is something that I think will come out as we're going through why this is the title. But first, I want to do a little exercise. In the middle of your table, you've got some square sheets of paper. I'd like everybody to grab one sheet. Hopefully there's enough for everybody. They just look like this. What we're going to do here is we're going to make a paper balloon. Believe it or not, you can make balloons out of paper. Just like that. I like to have something at these conferences that you get to take home and you get to share with your kids, or if you're like me, you keep them for yourself. So this is just a fun little thing, and since I don't want to be beaten by Michelle, we've got a timer here. So that's my, my little minute glass going. We've actually already started. We've got 5 total minutes for this exercise. All right, you know what? We are out of time. Time is up. I want you to take these things and just crumple up, throw them on the table. Just forget it. You know, sorry, that's, this worked a lot better in my planning process. So just, yeah, please don't try to keep them, just crumple them up, throw them in the middle of the table. All right, so how did that feel? Disappointing. Anybody else? How did that feel? Unfulfilling. Not fulfilling. Anybody else? Stressful. Stressful. Interesting. Why was it stressful?
Because I felt bad for you because you were kind of failing in your...
Thank you very much. I'm filled with confidence for the rest of our talk here. Did anybody get anything out of that exercise? Did you get anything of value out of that exercise? Go ahead. It's okay to say no. I'm hoping you're going to say no. This is the feeling of meaninglessness. What you're experiencing is an utter lack of meaning. You just wasted 5 minutes of your day doing something that ended up being a crumpled sheet of paper in the middle of your table. Now, that was just 5 minutes. Imagine if you spend days, weeks, months, years working on something and it ends up a crumpled sheet of paper in the middle of your table. How is that going to feel? That is meaningless, and that's what we're going to talk about here throughout the day, or throughout my presentation. And I want to say this is a very psychological sort of presentation. It's very touchy-feely. I am an engineer. I am not a touchy-feely sort of guy. But this is critically important, and I'm going to walk you through a couple of studies here that show you what this does to your business. Does anybody know what a Bionicle is? Thus the title, part of the title at least. Bionicles were toys about a decade ago made by Lego. My son was the perfect age at the time they launched, and so I have a giant bin of these sitting in my, my basement right now. They're basically little robots that you can build, about 40 pieces or so to build a robot. And there was actually a psychological study done where what they had to do, each subject had to build Bionicles. And they were given a set of Bionicles to build. And they were paid for their time. The purpose of the study was to slowly decrease the rate of pay that they got for each Bionicle to find out when they quit. Starts at $2, goes down 11 cents, $1.89, goes down 11 cents, $1.78. And each time they build one, they're told, okay, this is how much you have, and this is how much you will have if you build another one. Study was divided into 2 groups. One group got to take their Bionicle and put it on their desk and then start building the next set. The other group had 2 sets of Bionicles. They would take the box, they'd assemble their Bionicle, hand it back to the researcher. The researcher would then, while they're building the second one, disassemble it and put it right back in the box. This was called the Sisyphus condition. Anybody know the myth of Sisyphus? He's a Greek king who angered the gods in a really bad way, so they decided to punish him by making him roll a stone uphill, and when he gets it all the way to the top, it rolls right back down, and he's got to keep doing that for all eternity. That is brutal. But that's basically what they were doing here. You build this Bionicle, disassembled right in front of your eyes, and you're like, why am I doing this? The first group made on average 11 Bionicles before they gave up. The second group, again, the only difference was that they were having their thing disassembled, so they didn't have any meaning in sitting in front of them, only built 7. That's a 50% difference. And remember, it's not just a 50% difference, they're getting paid less with each one of them. The group on the left, they were willing to build Bionicles for as low as $1 on average. The group on the right had to be paid about $1.40. It's 40% more to keep building these Bionicles. This is just, the whole meaning out of this is just seeing one sitting on the desk. That's it. And it made that big a difference. So same group did another study, and this one had a really interesting twist. This was, again, a really meaningless task. You get a sheet of paper with random letters on it, and your assignment is to go out and find groups of pairs of letters that are together. And if you find 10 on the sheet, they'll pay you. And again, same thing. You're going down. It starts at 55 cents. It goes down to 50, 45, et cetera. This group, they divided into 3. The first group, you actually write your name at the top of the paper. You go up to the researcher. You hand it to them. They look it over and say, uh-huh. And then you give you a chance to do another one. The second group, they were not told to write their name on the paper, and in fact, nobody did. They came up to the researcher, they just hand it to them, and it goes on a sheet, on a stack. And they're told in advance, this is just going to go on a stack, we're not going to bother checking. The third group, actually, they hand it to the researcher, and it immediately goes into a shredder. Not looked at, and you can't even go back and look at it. Now, the first 2 groups, you might think, okay, this is a repeat of the study, one's meaningful, the other one's not, I get it. But that third one is really interesting because it gives you the opportunity to cheat. You don't have to put any effort at all. You could just circle random letters. You don't even have to circle 10. Go up, it goes into the shredder, nobody's going to check, and you get paid anyway. So why not, on that one, just go all the way to the end. Make the maximum amount of money. It's easy. It's just, they're handing you cash for doing nothing. So the research has that unique little twist here. Now, the group that was given some acknowledgement, the acknowledgement was nothing more than looking over the paper and they went all the way down on average to where they were only getting paid 14 cents per sheet. Over half completed all of them to the point where they were getting paid nothing. Guess where the shredder group came out? Just on average, how much did they have to get paid for their last one? They had to get paid twice as much, 28 cents on average. And this is a group, there's nothing to do. They just hand them a piece of paper and they're going to give you cash. But the meaninglessness drove it that much. How about the Dropbox group? Any guesses on where they came out versus that 14 cents on the left? They were also twice as much, 26 cents on average. Not quite twice, but close. That is the power of just making a little bit of meaning. And again, now translate that to our businesses where we are spending years developing products. And you get to the end, and you want to launch, and you can't. For whatever reason, it gets canceled. What do? This is where I've seen this in every organization I've ever worked in, I believe. The Cynic 6 stages of a project, they're very different than the stage gate stages, okay? Starts with, you start your project with wild enthusiasm. Yes, this is going to be fun. I'm going to build a paper balloon, and I'm going to take it back, and I'm going to learn a new skill, and I'll be able to do this at parties, and people think I'm really entertaining. After a while, you're sort of like, okay, this is getting a little confusing. I'm not quite sure where we're going. Panic sets in. Feels a lot of pressure. People are seeing me fail up on stage. Breaks into utter despair. Oh, God, okay, I just got to throw this wad in the middle of the table. Now management steps in, and you have the search for the guilty. And that's followed by the punishment of the innocent. And then, of course, the praise and honors for the non-participant. What I'm going to talk about today is doing the after-action review. Does anybody know what an after-action review is? Okay, that's good. I was afraid that everybody would do this all the time. Are you familiar with postmortems? A lot of people will call them postmortems. I hate that term because it's after death. And we're trying to make living innovations here, so I like the after-action review. We're going to replace those last 3 activities with the after-action review, and then hopefully we'll be able to get rid of some of the confusion and despair so that people are feeling wild enthusiasm throughout every project they ever do, all the time, everywhere. Okay, it's a little bit of exaggeration, but hopefully it makes things a lot better in all of your projects. The after-action review has been around, in theory at least, for forever. Ever since battles were being waged and Sun Tzu was making theory about how to wage war. Basically, it's all about, after you've done something, we're going to review what we did and learn something from it. It's been formalized in the last few decades. It's used in all of the branches of the military, and we're going to walk through that formal process here today. Starts with your objectives. This is a very fact-based approach, and you need to use metrics, so make sure that's part of this. You start with your objectives, you then move to what were the actual results. This is good and bad, positive and negative. Did we exceed any of our objectives? Did we fall below some of our objectives? Very fact-based. That's a critical point. You then move into the reasons. This is the first time you start getting into conjecture, theory, viewpoints, opinions. But you start trying to define the reasons for why you either exceeded or fell below your objectives, and then you move into the lessons learned. This is where you actually set up some action plans that will allow you to feed into the next set of objectives. Our previous presentation was all about how you design in the beginning to eliminate failure. This is a cyclical process. So yes, this is called the after-action review. It's after you've done some action, but it's feeding into the beginning of the next round. This is already built into your process, or at least it's supposed to be. The standard stage gate process ends with your post-launch review. How many people do that religiously? I thought so. I have not met a group yet where more than a couple of hands go up. If you look at lean processes, it's all about that learning and then building it into the next thing. This is already part of every philosophy, and yet I see no hands go up there. So you might be asking yourself, Brad, if this is so darn valuable, why don't more people do it? It's the classic Stephen Covey, got to sharpen the saw. And you fall into this problem where you are so worked up about having to saw down the next tree that you forget to sharpen the saw. And every stroke you make on every trunk of the tree dulls that saw a little bit, makes it a little bit harder next time. And pretty soon you can barely cut these things down, but there's so many more to do, you never bother to take the time to sharpen the saw. You gotta do that. And that's what the after-action review is all about. And you absolutely have to make it part of your discipline. And it is just a matter of discipline to make sure you do it. What is an after-action review not supposed to be? It is not a witch hunt. It is not about the search for the guilty, the punishment of the innocent, and praise and honors for the non-participants. It is about learning. People do need to be held accountable for their jobs. Not saying that you don't do that, but it's about trying to help them learn to do better next time. So it's not all about blame. Again, this is touchy-feely psychological stuff, but it's critically important. It is not about know-it-alls, and there's 2 problems with the know-it-alls. One is the psychological side. This is not about coming out and saying, well, I told you so. This succeeded. And I was the one who said it would succeed. So I told you it was going to succeed. It's not about that failed, and I told you it was going to fail. When you get into that, you tear down the ability of the group to actually evaluate effectively what has been done. It's also not all about one person dominating the conversation saying, well, I've decided that all of these are the reasons that happen, and typically that person is going to be the manager, because a lot of people will just tend to defer to the manager, so you've got to create a space where everyone can participate. You have to be aware, again, I'm going to get into psychology here, have to be aware of cognitive biases. Everybody heard of cognitive biases? These are things that are just evolutionarily wired into our brains, and they cause us to be irrational. And we don't even know we're being irrational when we're doing them. There's dozens and dozens of these that have been identified. I'm going to talk about 3 that are critically important here. First is the self-serving bias. The self-serving bias is we tend to take responsibility when things go well, and we tend to defer responsibility when things don't go well. The best example of this is if you read annual reports. If a company has a good year, it's because our strategy was on target, we communicated well to our customers, we developed new products that met their needs. If the year goes badly, it's because the Greek economy went sour, the winds coming out of Santa Anita were bad, whatever it might be. You blame outside factors. And in annual reports outside of Berkshire Hathaway's, which are really refreshing to read if you ever want to, that's where you get to see this kind of bias. When you're doing your after-action review, you have to be aware that that's going to be part of the problem. And when you start saying, why did we fail? Make sure you start looking inward. What did we do? What could we have done better? And when you succeed, make sure you look at what outside factors may have been just dumb luck, and we actually succeeded in spite of ourselves. You have to do both. Second one I want to talk about is called the hindsight bias. That bias is a tendency for, after something has happened, to go back and start assigning cause and effect. And the cause and effect isn't actually there, but you see the correlation because now you've experienced it, and you say, well, that must have been why things happen. Best example of this, my favorite example, is Inc. magazine. Every year has like their How I Did It issue. And they interview a bunch of very successful entrepreneurs and talk about, what did you do that made you successful? And inevitably, the stories are, I worked 18-hour days for 6.5 years, and that's how I did it. I refused to listen to my detractors, and that's how I did it. I can guarantee for every person that worked 18 hours a day and became a successful entrepreneur, you can find 2 that worked 19 hours a day and failed. For every one that didn't listen to their detractors and became successful, there's 3 that didn't listen to their detractors and failed. That wasn't the cause and effect. That's not what separated things out. But they start thinking, I've been successful, I worked really hard, that's how it happened. So you got to avoid that hindsight bias and really start looking carefully at what the actual causes and effects might have been. The third bias is an in-group versus out-group bias. This is a very dangerous bias within all of your teams. In groups, if evolutionary, we kind of have this tribal mentality, and our tribe is our in-group, and we respect them, we listen to them, we work hard for them. Other tribes are out-groups, and we are afraid of them, we are aggressive towards them, we don't like them. Considering where we are, my favorite example of that would be Ohio State versus Michigan football, okay? So if we had an Ohio State fan and a Michigan fan sitting at the same table and they're just talking, they're going to feel some of that animosity. I mean, these are rabid football fans. They have different teams. They're going to feel animosity towards each other. Context, though, makes a huge difference. And there's an experiment done in England where kind of the equivalent is Manchester United versus Arsenal. And the rabid fans there really that hate each other's teams. But you bring in a non-soccer fan or football fan, depending on how you want to look at it. Now suddenly, those two are together in an in-group. They are football fans, and we are united against that person who's the non-football fan. It's the classic, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Now, why am I talking about all this? Marketing, sales, engineering, manufacturing, they're all potentially their own little tribes. And they can start identifying each other as outgroups. You need on your teams to create that context where they are all a unified in-group. All right, moving on. This is actual one-pager. I strongly recommend keeping an after-action review very simple. I think you can do it on one page, even for big projects. And the reason I recommend that is because if you make it a 37-page deck that's presented to a big executive team, no one will ever do it. No one will pay attention to it. And this has actually been demonstrated in the armed forces. The armed forces are struggling right now where they have a lot of requirements. You have to do this every day. And it occurred to somebody within the Army, there's actually insufficient time to do all of those things. Not like, well, yeah, the old excuse, I don't have time. There truly, you can't do it. There's 27 hours worth of work to do in a 24-hour day. So, but everybody's saying they're doing it. So this organization, or these organizations that are built on trust, being able to trust each other in the heat of battle, are systematically lying because they're told they have to do these things and they don't. So if you tell your team, I want you to do this big report, blah, 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 they're going to check the boxes and move on because they've got other things to do. Thus, keep it simple. However, this used to be one of my favorite Einstein quotes. It's about keep it simple, but no simpler than it really needs to be. So you want to make sure it's complete. The reason it used to be one of my favorite Einstein quotes is that in the process of writing my book, I wanted to make sure I was fact-checking and finding sources, and it turns out he never actually said this. He said something similar, far less eloquent. Somebody said, well, I once heard Einstein said that, and it's just become Einstein said it. It's also attributed to Yogi Berra, which, if you can imagine two more divergent mental things than Einstein and Yogi Berra, God bless you. But the point of it is still right on. You want it to be simple, but you also want it to be complete. So in that one page that I had before, the columns were the 4 steps. You start with your objectives, you then move on to the actual results, what the reasons were, and then lessons learned. The far left column was dividing it up into 5 different topics. At the time of launch, you want to check whether you were on time, on budget, and on quality. Fairly straightforward, but you want to do that right at the time of launch. Later on after launch, and depending on your business and your time schedule, it could be 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever you want to do, but you want to make sure you come back and evaluate whether you made your financial targets and whether it served your customer the way you wanted it to serve your customer, based on their feedback. Why, Brad? This is what you're saying to yourselves. Why don't we just do that all at once after the project? Why do I have to do this thing at the time of launch? More psychology here. Your memory changes over time. The way memory works, which I find absolutely fascinating, is when you recall a memory and you process it and you're remembering it now, you put it back in storage and it's different. You've changed it based on what your emotional state right now. You've changed it based on things that are going on in your life right now. So if you wait a long period of time to then go back and say, how were things at the time of launch, you'll probably remember it differently. So you want to keep it fresh. You want to make your after-action review scalable. So there's lots of different types of projects that go on in an organization. Everything from a team meeting up to the launch of a brand new, radical, new-to-the-world type of product that is like climbing a mountain. When you're just scaling the little hill, do something very simple. When I was a total quality facilitator at one organization, we called it a process check at the end of a meeting. Took 1 to 2 minutes, but we always said, okay, what were our objectives for this meeting? Did we meet them? And do we need to change anything going on? Very quick. You don't have to fill out the sheet of paper, But you do then learn very quickly how to run these meetings better. And I promise you, the meetings got faster. And I actually had, at one point, a salesperson walk up to me and tell me it was her favorite meeting of the week. Because it was 15 minutes and it was very effective. But it took time to get there. Or if you have this major launch, you want to at least do that one pager and go through in detail with everyone on the team, maybe spending a half a day, a full day, really evaluating for what the lessons learned were and how to apply them to future projects. So you want to scale it. All right, I've talked all here about theory of the after-action review and why it's valuable. But again, a favorite quote, and I have no idea who said this, but in theory and practice are the same, but in practice they're different. What I want to do right now is actually work with you guys on an after-action review. We had, at the beginning of this presentation, a failed project, which, by the way, thank you, I was intending to fail, so that was a good thing. I want to walk through with you an after-action review on that project. So, I've already filled in the objectives. Very simple. We're going to learn to make a paper balloon and execute it within 5 minutes. Now let's talk about what were the actual results. Anybody? Just throw it out. Failed. What does failed mean? Incomplete. How is it incomplete? Didn't have enough. Okay. Thank you. I was hoping somebody would say didn't have enough time. The results portion is all about facts. We want to keep it very factual. Did we have enough time? Okay, not to brag, I have made hundreds, literally, of paper balloons in my life. I know I can make them behind my back with my eyes shut while sleeping. I timed myself. If I really just push and I'm going to just try to make one as fast as I can do it in under 2 minutes. So there was enough time. 5 minutes was enough time, but we failed. Why? Skills, experience, excellent. The instruction was horrible. Which, by the way, the instruction was horrible was, A, it was on purpose, but B, that would not fit in here because that is an expression of opinion. Tell me how the instructions failed you.
Visual was hard to understand.
Visual is hard to understand. Good. We could work on new visuals. Anybody else?
Oral and not written.
Oral and not written. Good. You have nothing to refer to other than what I'm saying. Excellent.
Distractions. You would divert from providing instructions to looking at the clock and wondering how much time you had.
Excellent. Now, I want to say that's a really good one because, yes, it's about me and my instructions, but it's something I can build on and learn from to do better next time. So that's a great way to put it. Okay, let's move on to the reasons. What's a reason that the instructions were bad?
Well, they're not visual versus written and stuff.
True. Okay, so that's part of the fact part. That's part of the results part. A reason, why? Let's think of the why.
I think I was looking at your photos, and there probably wasn't enough space to have every step in a photo.
Very true. Very true. Can somebody come up with a fundamental reason why the instructions were bad? I wanted it to be. Okay, so here is a critical point. When you're dealing with a new product, you are going to have pressures. And tell me, anybody doesn't have pressure coming from executive management to do certain things a certain way. Anybody ever have that problem? Everybody does. You're going to have bad instructions intentionally. Now, in my case, I wanted you to fail in order to do this demo, but other people are they really want you to succeed, but they're going to be giving you bad instructions. And you have to learn to be able to deal with that and provide that kind of feedback. Okay, any other reasons? Let's talk about more reasons why we didn't have enough time. So you mentioned inexperience. Skill is inexperience. So could we? So reason might be that we didn't have any practice time. We didn't have any training prior to how to do origami. All right, so let's move on into lessons. What kind of lessons can we take away from this? What would have helped that project succeed? Preparation, so some practice time.
An example
Or,
is we didn't have the papers on our table, so you were halfway through the first step before we all even had our papers in there.
very true. Good catch. They're on to me. Okay, what other lessons can we take away from this? What would have helped succeed? Working as a group, that's excellent. We did everything individually. I had everybody trying to do this and just paying attention to me, nobody helping each other. Very good. What else might help?
Eliminate the clock, maybe decrease stress.
Eliminate the clock or maybe increase the clock. Let's make it 10 minutes instead of 5. Great.
There were assumptions made on the skill set of the team.
Assumptions about the skills, that everybody can do this. Yeah, and knows what I'm talking about. Excellent.
There was no explanation as to what the value of having completed the project would have been.
Okay, now that's going to be in the reasons side. There was no explanation. So let's talk about the lessons. What would then be your conclusion from that?
Having an explanation why it's to our benefit to
Provide that kind of explanation. Excellent. So that, and I don't mean to pick on you. What I'm trying to show is this process, and it's very important to try to separate out these quadrants, and like with the results, making sure it's factual, not getting into, well, we didn't have enough time, because that kind of thinking is what is going to be the norm, and you have to push yourself to analyze on a factual basis a little differently, so that then the flow of the whole process will work better for you. Because you want to get value out of this. This is an incredibly valuable exercise. I think we've got about 10 minutes left. What I've got is, and here's a suggestion that did not come up. What if the paper actually was printed with all the folds, and you had lines showing you where to fold? Down to the final step, you will just hold it open like a little X. There's a hole in the bottom. You just give it a little puff, and now you have your paper balloon, which is collapsible back into a flat state so you can get it home safely. So I just want to move on. One last slide. I love this futility because no one actually cares if you can do it. That is how teams feel when they don't have something to show for what they've accomplished. And even when a project fails, you've accomplished something, you've learned something, and you want to give your team meaning by helping them have that experience of understanding what they learned and how they're going to improve both their own performance in the future as well as the team's performance and the organization's performance. So that's all I have. Thank you.